Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you are in the Central or West Coast areas, and welcome to this webinar from Infotech and Esri called GIS and Construction, Better Together, Bridging the Gap Between Construction and GIS. I am one of your hosts today. My name is Adam Dewitowitz. I am the Senior Manager for Solutions Engineering here at Infotech. And with me today is Rob Hathcock. Rob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you, Adam. My name is Rob Hathcock. I'm an account executive at Esri, and I focus on the transportation market, specifically in the local and regional governments. My responsibility and role is to communicate and to deliver the results and the value of the ArcGIS platform while also highlighting our great experiences and partnerships like we have with Infotech. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks for being here, Rob. Just a few housekeeping items as we get into this. As it is a webinar format, you will all be muted and off screen. Rob and I will go off screen as well for the majority of the presentation, but we will come back on at the end. As well, if there are any questions that come up, there is a Q&A feature that you can click into, or there will be information at the end if we do not have time to get to questions, that you can always submit your questions to us and we'd be happy to follow up. So with that, I'm going to go off video and we'll jump in. So it's interesting this time that we find ourselves in the construction industry, because this quote is great, that the construction industry is way overdue for a major disruption. And I don't think anything could be closer to the truth. We see the impact that technology is making today on the construction industry as a whole, regardless of whether you are in the design end, the construction end, the asset management or GIS end, or even the planning and pre-construction and bidding phases. Since COVID has come around, it seems that it really has been an ignition to change that really has needed to happen in this industry. We know that the construction industry is one of our laggard industries in the United States. And we know that construction is typically the land of steady habits. But with things and the way that we build and design and manage being the steady boat that we all expect, there's always the opportunity to do it better. There's always the opportunity to look forward and see where change can make a positive impact. And I think that we're really seeing that today with the rapid development of technology, the way that AI is assisting both in the space and in the rapid technology of the development to help move this forward. So it's a very exciting time to be in this industry, if you ask me. So with that, we need to start to talk about this disruption. And what does this disruption really look like? It really starts by thinking about your projects in a new dimension. GIS is more than just a map. It's a single unified view that can bring all of your project information together in its real world context. And that means that this unified view can help with proactively modeling scenarios ahead of time for things like risk mitigation, right? Instead of discovering utility conflicts that might have otherwise only gotten caught by looking at paper plans, you can start to assess those risks during planning phase, during pre-construction phase, or even during the construction phase ahead of when the physical work is being done, if all of that data really resides in a GIS space. And that allows us to prevent unforeseen challenges that can derail schedules and derail budgets. So the ability to monitor project progress in real time against your plan, are your crews working in the correct phase? Are they in the correct space? Is the material laydown area going to impact construction or an environmental area? All of these things become vitally important to keeping projects on schedule. And ultimately, when you have this type of data at your fingertips, every stakeholder has the ability to look at that same data in the same context. And that means that you can accelerate decision making. There's less ambiguity and more clarity, which directly improves project delivery and overall performance. But what's the problem here? If the data is so valuable, why do we have such a hard time with it? Well, the problem is what we like to refer to as the digital dead end. While we capture what was built, we often fail to capture it with precise location. Or if we do, we tend to capture it in a 2D plan or planimetric type scenario. Maybe it even ends up on paper as an as-built, but that's where that data tends to stop. Adding the geospatial component to something like GIS in a greater system that is connected is the missing link that unlocks the true long-term potential of our projects. Because construction and GIS teams have traditionally operated in separate worlds, a lot of that valuable as-built record data is essentially thrown away at the end of a project closeout, or it hits that dead end of ending up on a plan someplace, but never really gets carried forward. It gets locked in a file cabinet or disconnected spreadsheet, and that can create a cascade of costly problems. So the idea here is, how do we connect our data in a way that we capture it during planning and we add to it during the pre-construction and bidding phases. And then when we get to construction, that's where we really capture the bulk of all the rich data that we want to be able to pass on for the purposes of asset management and the next phase of planning. And there's some risks and problems there, right? When you don't have connectivity like that, broken data handoff can create increases in risk and legal liability. Not having an accurate record of your asset locations, you may face challenges with regulatory compliance, and you're far more vulnerable to contractor claims and disputes. Additionally, it leads to that hindered future planning. If you don't have all of that data at your fingertips, it's going to create additional burden the second time or third time around in the planning phase, because now your engineers are forced to create new designs based on inaccurate paper data or even inaccurate GIS data that's simply not complete. That inevitably leads to conflicts between the design and the real world, and that can cost in terms of redesigns or flawed capital improvement plans. The old joke in construction is, we do it nice because we do it twice, right? The idea here is, we want to do it once and we want to do it right the first time. And that means we have to have the best, cleanest connected data to be able to do that. And kind of last, major, it can cause massive financial inefficiency. Again, that we do it nice because we do it twice, except that second twice of doing it has a cost. We face increased life cycle costs from reactive maintenance, struggle to justify and secure federal funding without good data, and we're forced into a cycle of duplication of effort, paying crews to rediscover those assets that you already paid to document once during construction, but then dead-ended somewhere on a plan. So when we think about the data, we want to kind of have this mindset that the data captured during construction really is mission critical. It's sort of the birth certificate of your assets. Every day on a job site, your teams are generating a massive amount of incredibly valuable and very rich data. We argue that this as-built record is the most valuable byproduct for any construction project. It is quite literally that birth certificate for every asset that you're going to manage for the next 30 to 50 years. So for operations and maintenance, this data is the difference between proactive and reactive. Knowing the precise location, the material that was used, the installation date of things like a water main, allows you to perform targeted preventative maintenance. Not knowing or not having that rich data, or worse, having it in disparate locations that takes significant amounts of time to find, means you're just going to be waiting for it to fail, which is exponentially more expensive. It leads to things like deferred maintenance, and we all know deferred maintenance becomes construction projects after a while. So we want to think of de-risking future planning, right? Future capital planning. This data becomes gold for that purpose. When your planners can base the next transportation improvement plan on actual unit costs and performance data from your last 5 paving projects, the entire planning process is de-risked. Budgets become realistic and plans become achievable. So, how do we connect these two solutions together? Well, the solution here is to build a digital bridge. And to do that, we have to clearly define the roles of our systems. And this partnership that Infotech has created with Esri is built on a very simple but powerful premise. Our platforms are where the authoritative, contractual, and financial data is created and managed as part of our CMS systems. They are the official, legal, defensible record of the project. It's the what? Esri, with GIS, is the aggregator of truth. The ArcGIS platform is a single environment where the authoritative data from construction comes together with all the other project data: planning, design, environmental, pre-construction, bid, in its real-world spatial context. It's the where. And when we connect the what to the where with these two systems, we ensure the official authoritative record of what was built is permanently linked to where it was built. And that simple connection eliminates the digital dead end and preserves the data's value for the entire agency. So what's the benefit of a connected ecosystem? First, we achieve optimized capital investment. We can shift from being reactive to that proactive state and implement performance-based planning, ensuring that we maximize ROI from public funds. Second, we get predictable project delivery. Budgets are based on reality, not estimates, which reduces the need for large contingencies and enhances public trust. Third, we achieve preservation of institutional knowledge, which is a key component today that we all know is very going away at a very quick pace, right? We talk about the brain drain. The why behind decisions are now captured in the system, and that accelerates onboarding for new staff and creates a culture of continuous improvement and a culture of continuous passing of that knowledge down the line. And finally, we increase agility and resilience. We can adapt more quickly to new challenges like climate change and the ability to use data to evaluate new technologies and drive better policy if we have that data connected in a singular environment that allows us to leverage it better. So when it comes to Infotech's side of the house, the engine of value is GIS is only as good as the data within it. Without that source of rich, verified, and authoritative information, GIS is just an empty map. At Infotech, we are the engine that creates the data that gives that GIS its long-term value. And the way we do that is our bidding and procurement tools create the digital starting point for the project and provide the foundational award data that turns into a plan or turns a plan into a funded reality. The document management systems that we have provide the rich context, linking all the official documents to the project's spatial record. And that helps create a complete geospatially aware history. And finally, and arguably most important, our construction management platform, Appia, is the primary engine that creates the valuable daily as-built data, the daily reports, the item quantities, the payment information that transforms a simple map into a high value asset management tool. And we think of these data points as primary data points, but it's also important to point out that there's other data that comes in these systems as well. When we talk about things like daily reports that have a date and item quantities, well, now we have production data. And the things that we can do with production data by linking it to schedules only further enhances the value of all of this data in one place that's easy to manipulate and easy to leverage. One of the most important ways that we do that here at Infotech, and the way that we genesis this data into ArcGIS, is by connecting the field to office. We have intentionally, with Esri, gone out and created a solution whereby we not only speak to ArcGIS in a back and forth format with Appia, but we've tied it to a lot of Esri technologies, and in particular field maps, and the ability to be hardware agnostic in a way that allows external users, inspectors, surveyors, GIS personnel to capture that real-time geospatial data for all of those assets as they're being built. The power in that is that it allows us to unlock subsurface data that otherwise we might not have collected after the fact on a project. So now we not only are getting real-time data during construction and streamlining our collection and observation process during the construction build-out, but we're given the opportunity to collect data that was once very difficult to collect, or we might spend money after the fact in the next planning cycle with other tools like ground penetrating radar and potholing programs to verify things like utility locations and utility depths. Again, another example of how we can really leverage this relationship to provide a better experience and significantly more value for end users. And so the vision is a continuous data loop, right? And one of the most recent things that we've done is to be able to connect our Appia data to Esri's capital programs dashboard. The automated integration of this is the first step in being able to take this data and use it at the plan and bid phase. And in doing that, we start to fulfill this flywheel that we see here, where the data is no longer coming into a dead end, but is simply moving in this continuous loop. And so I'm going to pause here for a moment because I want Rob to now step in and give you his view of the value from the GIS side. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Rob.
Yeah, I think that it's important to communicate why this partnership works. And at Esri, we see this partnership working because each day we bump into customers and agencies that are generating incredibly rich construction inspection data. And there's a gap. There's a gap in the market. And what we found is that Appia fulfills that gap here. And where we see it at is in the quantities being inventoried, the materials, change orders, daily reports, photos and funding, allocations and audit-ready documentations. We may not have a specific solution for that. And so the partnership is really strong because at the same time where Infotech and the Appia product subsidize some of the areas that our local governments and regional governments are asking for, at the same time, these same agencies are using ArcGIS to plan capital improvement programs, to coordinate with utilities and MPOs, to prioritize investments, track performance, and even communicate progress to leadership and the public. And what we see here is that both systems are strong on their own, but they serve different but connected layers of an agency's work. And so ultimately, the partnership exists because agencies deserve that seamless way to bring accuracy and integrity of Appia's construction data into the broader operational picture that ArcGIS provides. And so with our capital project coordination, it can be used to organize an official capital improvement plan, coordinate with external agencies, and share project updates. We know that inspectors, they document materials and those quantities and conditions that we talked about earlier. And what that does is it turns into an authoritative record of construction. And when this information becomes geospatially referenced inside ArcGIS, agencies gain immediate insights into questions that they are asked and required to answer each day. And so what we know about what's happening across the United States right now is that our robust infrastructure, it's crucial. And it's crucial and it's dynamic, and it's dynamic to a community's economic vitality and overall quality of life. And what we see is, years of neglect across the U.S., and it's led to crumbling roads and bridges and need to repair, outdated public buildings, and other significant infrastructure challenges. So state and local governments, they formulate the capital improvement plans that detail the location, the timing, and financing of capital projects. And these are multi-year plans that guide strategic investments that prolong the life and increase the value and enhance the capabilities of their critical infrastructure. But understanding where public infrastructure projects are planned and where they're aligned with other projects, with private utility investments, it ultimately fosters economic growth and builds more resilient communities. It's also what helps communities reduce neighborhood disruptions and any reconstructions costs. So what we have is this capital project coordination solution that delivers a set of capabilities that helps state and local governments define capital project plans. It also coordinates project investments and organizes a capital improvement plan that allows for the tracking of the performance in active capital projects. And lastly, it communicates the investments that's being made to the stakeholders. And what I wanted to communicate here is that we have the ability to create a plan. But what we realize is that without Infotech and the technologies that they provide, we were only scratching the surface of what's possible. And by hanging projects into the map, we established the geospatial context that every capital program needs. And this is the foundation. It shows the location, it shows the timing, sequencing, dependencies, and the spatial relationships that influence the decisions of the project. But what we saw was that context is not the whole story, a whole story. Appia brings life and truth to the projects. It contributes the daily reality of construction, and it adds the records that prove progress through photos and ultimately show what's happening on the ground. The inspections that validate quality and the quantities and payments that define the project health. So when ArcGIS and Appia work together, the map stops being a static planning layer and becomes a living record of construction, and it's actually unfolding. And it's unfolding in ways that we can ask questions of it, like where are we investing, or what are the impacts on future growth? And then most importantly, in a lot of minds, how do these projects align with long-term asset goals? And so one of the areas that we also wanted to communicate is that by this relationship, not only are you getting the great technology from Infotech, but you're also getting the capabilities to extend those technologies. By putting the data into a system of record and then developing a system of insights, you now have a new way to engage that data and to unlock those insights. We call it a system of engagement also. And so those are the three pillars. And speaking of three pillars, we're also communicating that we're opening up, ArcGIS as a geospatial AI platform. And we want to focus on Geo AI by using our desktop experiences, by using the software that comes with the platform. And so you see that on that Geo AI category. But we also want to use some AI assistance so that we can access more efficiencies and productivities. And those are both embedded into our products, and there are also some standalone that we'll see here in a second. And then lastly, on the right-hand side here, we have our AI agents, which are agentic. It's the verb, the doing of the data. It is the migration of the data into the platform, and then ultimately allowing questions to be asked in natural language. And so when we pull all this together, we now have this platform, and we have this framework. And so what I wanted to show here is an example of that. And I would ask our audience here to be clever and think about how to tie data directly into one of our instant apps called Data Explorer. And this was revealed at the 2025 Esri User Conference back in July. And so what you're looking at here is a new way to ask questions of data. And so think about our non-GIS professionals who are out into the field. They're using Appia to upload the data and take the photos. And they may not have a long history of writing complex queries. But what we're really good at as a human species is we're good at asking questions. And so one of the questions in this instance is looking at the data because it's now sitting in that system of record, and saying things like, how many open service requests were created in a singular month? And just being able to ask that in an app without having to write a query and have it delivered back to not only the stakeholders, the folks out in the field, the project managers, but also the public. And so we take that same mindset and we could turn it into pay items. And you can see here how we're asking the app itself, how many unique financial project IDs are using a pay item that you may find in Infotech's product. And so it's going through and it's querying that data because just like Adam was talking about earlier, you've now tied it to a system of record. And what we've done is we've laid down the foundation to visualize it, but we also are now laying down a foundation to query it and ask questions of it. So, example, without having to look at a complex, data table, how many financial project IDs that have this particular pay item. And so it doesn't get shelved inside of those cabinets, and it doesn't get pushed into, books that no one's going to look up in the future, but it's being stored directly in the data so that you can ask the natural questions of how many of those exist. And then because you can do that, it queries that data, it structures it, and it communicates it back to you. So in this instance here, you can see that it's looking for all the pay items that are tied to any of the financial projects. And then it reveals that. It reveals how many exactly were found and the exact project ID that they were found under. And so you can see that it revealed that there was 20 projects that used pay item 50431-87. And that's an interesting place to be, right? It's almost a carrot for the process, right? This is the end result. If you put your data into the platform, if you tie your financial records and your pay items into a GIS, then we can extend it. And that relationship that I was talking about earlier is now complete. It's a complete life cycle. And so at the end, the result is, a map that's now displaying exactly where those particular projects are that are tied to those financial project IDs, which then are tied directly to that particular pay item. And this is much easier to understand because we all know that if we were to look at an Excel spreadsheet with tons of cells and tons of values in it, and I were to ask you, to tell me what you see, it might take you a while to figure out what the pattern is. But if I ask you in an instance like this, what do you see here? You can see a context because that data that was collected out into the field and tied directly to the projects is now being brought to life through geography. And you can start seeing the patterns here of where things are emerging and where things are. And so with that, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity for us to communicate the value of a strong capital planning coordination program through the ArcGIS solutions, and why it's so important to connect all parts and all facets of the many projects that we have across the United States. Adam?
Thanks, Rob. And a great overview of just how important and timely this relationship is for the industry as a whole, right? And where we see the industry going, and the way that we can really harness technology that we have at our fingertips now and in the future. And it definitely shows that the ability to push beyond even the borders that we show here today are just not that far away. I have many conversations about this with different people day to day and week to week, and the same thought continues to come to my mind all the time, that what once seemed like future state is here. The future is not tomorrow. The future is today. And I can only really be excited for the things that come next that we haven't even thought of. But this step is certainly a large leap in the right direction that is only going to help build the cornerstone for what comes next. And so the future of construction is connected, right? And here we are, Esri and Infotech, making it better together. That major digital disruption our industry's been waiting for. It's not a singular piece of hardware. It's not a singular piece of software. It's not a UAS or new technology that may come out of AI. In all of those cases, it is always going to be about fundamentally breaking down the data silos, connecting them together, and being able to recover cost and time that the disparate nature of those has cost for decades. And so that transformation is only possible by combining these two best-in-class systems: the authoritative source of truth for construction data from Infotech, and the powerful geospatial context and aggregation that we get from Esri and all of Esri's suite of products. And by doing that, we're not just improving single phases of projects, we're connecting the entire life cycle of public infrastructure, and together we're building the future of infrastructure management. And that should be a goal that everyone today and into the future really strives for every day of their career, is to continue to build on that gold mine of data in ways that are meaningful. When I got into this business 25 years ago, coming into the construction inspection and civil design, my father was my mentor. And if there was one thing that he impressed on me, it was that we should always leave things better than we found them. And I think that that's an overarching theme that we see here today. With our partnership, we're really striving to do that, to meet that end. We've got a great start here. And I think what comes next only continues to build on leaving it better for the next generation of engineers, the next generation of maintenance folks, the next generation of construction inspectors and contractors that are going to continue to overhaul, rehab, and replace our infrastructure for decades to come. And I would charge that we not only should strive for that, but we owe it to them to do that. It's our way of honoring the legacy of all of the work that has been put into this point and all of the work that's going to come after for years to come.